Hello, I'm Barbara Anderson. Welcome to The Pressure Point. This week we deal with the difficult and sensitive subject of abortion, and more specifically, abortion clinics. Abortion clinics have been operating in the United States for some years now. Here in Canada, the recent openings of the clinics such as the Morgan-Dollar Clinic in Toronto and the Every Woman's Health Clinic here in Vancouver have caused a lot of controversy, including protests and demonstrations. Abortion is the kind of subject you can't discuss without emotions running high. And that's not necessarily a bad thing unless it prevents you from hearing the other person. So we've invited 3 women, each with varying degrees of involvement in the issue, to share with us their reflections on abortion. Each woman has a different point of view, and yet each one has a high regard for the sanctity of human life. Hilda Thomas has been making headlines as the spokesperson for Vancouver's first abortion clinic.
Well, you know, this issue has been going on for a long time in Canada, ever since the late 60s, in fact, when Section 251 of the Criminal Code was introduced. And it has always seemed to me that a woman's liberty is bound up with her right to control her own body. Section 251 actually put very severe restrictions on a woman's right to choose about one of the most important decisions she'll ever make in her life.
As director of the Community Pregnancy Care Society in Coquitlam, Grace Ravensbergen counsels alternatives to abortion for pregnant women in crisis.
My position on abortion is that abortion is the taking of life, and I believe that all life has inherent value. That includes the life of the unborn as well as life of born. I believe that the value of life does not depend upon the attitude of the mother or upon circumstances or upon if it's wanted or not. And so I feel all life should be protected.
Eleanor O'Neill chairs the Adult and Family Working Unit of the United Church's BC Conference. This diverse group of committed Christians helps form church policies on societal issues.
Abortion needs to be accepted as a reality in today's society, but that it is not the ideal by any stretch of the imagination, that more important than full abortion services would be the approach that family planning, family life courses, adequate birth control information should be much more readily available so that abortion would not be expected or accepted in our community.
I believe that the abortion issue is not really a matter of the rights of the unborn versus the rights of the mother. I believe that we need to look at the needs of the unborn and the needs of the mother and seek to address both of those, and that the unborn needs protection for life, but also the mother needs to have certain needs met. There are reasons why she's seeking abortion. We have to address those reasons.
I don't think you can treat this as a question of balancing of rights. The anti-choice forces, the prohibitionists, try to treat the fetus in its early stages of development as if it were an infant that one could rock in one's arms, but it's not. It is not a child until it is born. The Supreme Court suggested that the state might have some interest in protecting the rights of the fetus. But you know, women do not go out and have abortions in the 28th week of their pregnancy. If a woman decides that she does not want to bring a child into the world, she makes that decision at a very early stage in the game. And you cannot call a 10 or 12-week-old fetus or an embryo at an earlier stage a child. It simply is not a child.
There is great difficulty understanding life's significance. We can't understand fully the mystery that life and death involves. And to be absolutely certain that life begins at conception, I think is a certainty that's just not possible for us in this world. And I think sometimes those who are completely for pro-choice, which I am too, I am pro-choice, but conservatively so, tend not to look at that mystery of life and death. There needs to be the balance, there needs to be a recognition that we don't really know when human life begins. And if we presume to have all the right answers, I think we're asking ourselves to be omnipotent, omniscient, which we're not.
Supposing, for instance, that the federal government brought in a law that said that after, well, let's say 30 weeks, the fetus was entitled to protection under the law. The implications for women are really horrendous. Could the state, for instance, say that a pregnant woman was not allowed to consume alcohol, that she couldn't smoke, that she couldn't engage in certain kinds of activities, that she couldn't do certain jobs? Could they require a woman to have a cesarean section against her will? Could they prohibit home births in the interest of the fetus? I don't know whether you've read Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, but I don't want to live in a society where the state makes that kind of decision about what a woman can do with her body. So the question of fetal rights is more than the question of protecting an unborn, protecting a child before birth, if one can speak of such a thing. It's a question of a balancing act which would be very, very difficult to achieve.
I believe our position on the abortion issue does not set back women's equality or women's rights in society. Women are unique in that they can bear children, and I feel that to seek equality with men, they should not deny that uniqueness, and that taking someone else's life to obtain certain rights cannot, I feel, be justified.
As far as new abortion legislation is concerned, the federal government, the Mulroney government, made a kind of a feeble stab at it in the spring. We hope that they will drop the whole idea. Even under Section 251, there were no gestational limits. There was nothing to say that there's a certain point after which an abortion cannot be performed. We don't think there's any need for gestational limits. We believe it's a slander against women to suggest that they make this decision frivolously, or that they would have late abortions for any but the most urgent reasons. And it's quite clear that if there is any new law, it cannot go against the Supreme Court decision, which said that women have a right to make this decision freely in a democratic society, and that they have a right to access, certainly in the early stages of a pregnancy.
I feel that we do need a law that gives protection to the unborn, as well as protection to the mother, in the sense that parents' needs are addressed when they feel that they can't cope with having a child, that social and economic reasons are addressed, that better support services are encouraged both by the government and by the community.
My own feeling is that the government has a responsibility to continue hospital abortions. I think there's very definitely a need to consider the women's right to choice and freedom, but balancing that, a need to consider what I think is an increasing callousness towards life that is part of society at the present, to balance reverence for life and the right to choose and freedom, I think is very important. It's not just an individual's choice. It also is a societal decision, and like so many other things, there's no easy black and white answer. We're faced with so many shades of gray.
I think the final decision for if a woman should have an abortion or not needs to be hers. No one can make the decision for her, but there are different support systems that will help her to make a decision. We feel that she should look at the total picture and should seriously consider alternatives, and knowing that there are possible physical complications for abortion, there are possible psychological complications, that it is a very big decision, and I think that is downplayed, and that we need to emphasize that. It is her decision, but she needs to make an informed choice and know that society can support her if she continues pregnancy.
Mothers who choose to keep their children may not have, and very likely don't have, adequate supports for bringing up the child unless they have very strong family support. I see society's responsibility being very much in the way of caring for children. I think our society does a very poor job of caring for children who need more help than one parent or even some two-parent families are able to provide. And to make abortion impossible, I think, will increase society's problem. Society as a whole must be more responsible to provide adequate services for children and to provide adequate services to prevent unwanted pregnancies. And I think there's where we need, both as a church and as a society as a whole, where we need to place more of our efforts to prevent the problem rather than having to deal with the problem after the fact.
If there are women who are using abortion as a birth control method, I certainly think they're rare in this country. It's not unknown in many countries around the world. But to suggest that a woman would choose abortion as a method of birth control is to overlook the fact that this is an operation, it's a medical procedure, it's a traumatic decision to make. So it seems to me to be rather unreasonable to suggest that any intelligent woman, any thoughtful woman, would use it as a method of birth control. Now, if women are not intelligent and not thoughtful, surely it's better that they should come to a clinic where there are sympathetic people prepared to counsel them about birth control methods than have them go through the hospital mill and come out the other end no wiser than they were when they went in. You know, VGH used to have, Vancouver General used to have a women's center, and they did a questionnaire once asking young women questions about their reproductive lives. And the results were horrifying. These young women knew absolutely nothing about their own sexuality. They had completely mistaken ideas about the period in which they were fertile, for example. That shouldn't happen, but it was happening a few years ago, and I have no reason to believe it's any different now. So the counseling provided by the clinic would make sure that young women knew what they were doing if they were sexually active, and we would hope that no woman would ever use abortion as a method of birth control. We believe no woman in her right mind would ever do that.
In our experience at the pregnancy center, we have seen that the very women for whom abortion might be said it was needed because of their emotional problems or their inability to cope are those who would be the ones most likely to have difficulty handling the abortion. It does not really solve their problem. There are other problems that are causing their emotional problems. And so abortion itself does not address that issue. And we feel that if a woman is given support and her loneliness or inability to cope or her economic or social problems are addressed, then she can solve her problems in another way.
Clinics are much to be preferred over hospitals as the setting for early abortions. If you want to be crass about it, the simple question of cost enters into it. When a hospital provides an abortion, they have to use very expensive operating room facilities, and the whole apparatus of the hospital enters into it. So clinics are, first of all, cost effective. But that's not our reason, of course. We think a clinic is the best setting in which to provide an abortion because people who work in clinics are supportive, they're sympathetic, they are there because they want to be there. And another reason is that hospitals are no longer providing counseling. We think counseling is absolutely essential, so that if a woman goes into a clinic, she should have full counseling to make sure that she has formed her opinion freely, and then she should have counseling after the procedure is performed, if that's her choice, so that she will not feel guilty, so that she will not suffer any post-abortion trauma. So we are determined that we are going to provide pre- and post-abortion counseling in a supportive atmosphere for any woman who makes that decision.
I don't know how adequate that counseling can be in a coalition clinic because of the funding problems. I think that in order for abortion to take place at all, there needs to be considerable counseling prior to an abortion. I think it needs not to happen just in the hour prior to the procedure, but rather at least a week prior, so that the woman considering having an abortion can have time to really digest what's happening, to look at many sides of the situation, not just the immediate crisis, which indeed it is, a crisis.
We do not intend to coerce any woman into having an abortion. We are not in the business of encouraging women to have abortions. We're going to provide the necessary, safe medical procedure if, after discussing the problem with a counselor, a woman decides that that's the option she wants to pursue. But we are certainly not in the business of selling abortions.
I feel that abortion clinics represent a failure of our society to meet the needs of those who feel they cannot cope with an unplanned or an unwanted pregnancy. And I see that abortion clinics will make abortion that much easier to obtain, and they also will seek to reduce the trauma. So therefore I think that there will be an increase in abortions, and I feel when they were occurring in the hospital, at least it may have been a deterrent in the sense that people would feel it was done for medical reasons, or where the life or health was in danger, whereas now I think it's more accepted.
I think it could quite easily happen that a clinic would make abortion a part of accepted life, and I think that kind of acceptance would make it very difficult for a woman who had a pregnancy that was unwanted to stand back and analyze what was happening to her, to recognize that there were other opportunities or other possibilities for that particular pregnancy. And I would suspect that there are women who have had abortions in a situation where it was more freely accepted, who after the fact wished that they had not. And again, it's not an easy decision, it's not an easy situation, and I think any step to making it normally accepted down the road could easily trigger possibilities for enormous guilt if a woman had opted for an abortion without really struggling with the idea whether to or not to. As I say that, I'm quite convinced that nearly every woman who chooses to have an abortion does so after agonizing. And anything that makes that decision easy is inappropriate.
I don't think there's any evidence that clinics lead to greater acceptance of abortion. There have been clinics in Quebec ever since the Péquiste government came into power, and there are now clinics in Ontario. There's a clinic in Manitoba. In the United States, 90% of the procedures are done in clinics, but the rate of abortion has not been rising steeply over the last few years. And then you look at a country like Ireland, where abortion is prohibited in the constitution of the country, and in fact Irish women have to go to England if they want to procure an abortion, and the evidence seems to be that the rate of abortion is increasing among Irish women. It's not declining. So I don't think there's any evidence that clinics encourage women to have abortions.
The Community Pregnancy Care Society is an organization that seeks to help women who are faced with an actual or a possible unplanned or unwanted pregnancy make an informed choice about various alternatives that they themselves may feel are open to them or that society says is open to them. We feel it's very important that a woman have complete information before she makes a decision. We offer support through pregnancy if that's needed, and also support after pregnancy, and encourage the community to offer support to those who find it difficult to go through a pregnancy or to cope with parenting.
From the outset, when we first organized the coalition in January of 1968, we said our first goal was to set up the abortion clinic in Vancouver. Our long-range goal was to provide reproductive health clinics throughout the province, which would deal with the whole range of health problems of women. Now, we obviously are not going to set up such clinics, but we wanted to establish a model clinic, first of all, so that we could persuade the government that the health care needs of women are not being adequately met under the current system, and that there should be clinics throughout the province that would deal with things like prenatal counseling, prenatal nutrition, pelvic inflammatory disease, breast cancer screening, hysterectomy, the whole range of health needs that are special to women. So we're not ambivalent at all. We know that this clinic will provide a necessary service, will be a model in its collective operation, in its teamwork, that it will provide a dignified and supportive atmosphere to women, and that it will be the foundation for a much broader range of services.
At our center, when someone comes in, they often come in for a pregnancy test, and we always ask them what options they are considering if the pregnancy is a problem. We give information on fetal development, we give information on the abortion procedure and possible physical and psychological complications. We also go over the option of adoption and also keeping and what that would involve. We don't present any option as an easy option, and we seek to listen to the client's concerns and her problems and try to help her possibly view things from a different perspective. And we never pressure or coerce anyone to make a certain decision. We feel informed choice is very important. We feel value clarification is very important, because I think that's at the heart of the issue, that they have to evaluate whether we can really say that some life has value and some doesn't, and what kind of ramifications that's going to have on their life in the future and on all of society.
I think that women who choose to have abortions inevitably will make that decision after much struggle. And once the decision's made, it's made. Afterwards, there may be, and I suspect is, on occasion, guilt. I think a much larger proportion of a woman's feeling after an abortion is regret, mixed with relief. And all those feelings are going to be bouncing around for a long time after an abortion. I think, though, that for a woman who's had an abortion to feel enormous guilt after, if she has taken the time to worry it through and struggle through the whole situation, is not helpful. I think counseling after an abortion can help deal with any negative feelings a woman may have. I think regret very probably is one of the most difficult things to deal with, which is not guilt, but regret for that life that couldn't continue.
I feel that we can never judge someone who has an abortion. We do not call them murderers. We can say that abortion is the taking of life. If someone experiences guilt, remorse, depression, and other problems after they've had an abortion, we feel that they should be allowed to acknowledge that abortion was not a good decision at the time, and that healing can take place from there. If we say that it was the right decision for you at that time in your life, I feel it just encourages denial and repression of certain feelings that at some point of their life are liable to help prevent them from functioning well, or that will come to cause depression or other psychological problems. I feel that if someone does have problems with it, that if they can admit, yes, I took life and it was wrong, but it doesn't mean that they can't forgive themselves or that they can't be forgiven. They can carry on, I think, if they acknowledge that, and then real healing can take place.
I would not say, and I'm convinced the United Church would not say, that abortion is murder. I think it is a difficult situation to be faced with. I think when abortion has happened, if one feels that it was not one's first choice, if one feels that it had been a mistake, that may be. At the same time, I think God knows our feelings, our thoughts, our emotions, our spirits. If there is a feeling of distress after an abortion. I'd be surprised if there isn't distress after an abortion. I believe with all my heart and soul that God forgives and enables us to carry on.
I feel that we need to seriously address the issue of prevention of pregnancy when it would be a problem or in case of pregnancy for the unmarried. I think that we need to encourage people, especially young teenagers, to evaluate their sexual activity and encourage them to consider going back to abstinence even if they have been sexually active. In some cases, that lifestyle is chosen, and then contraceptives, certain forms of contraception that do not destroy an already developing life, may be a better option than abortion in some cases. We do not promote contraceptives. We do give information on contraceptives. We always seek to encourage abstinence, raise that as a possibility, and encourage them to consider it.
In the best of all possible worlds, no woman would ever need an abortion. In such a world, young women and young men would be taught from the time they were very small children to be responsible about their reproductive lives before anything else. The most important decision any human being can make is to bring another human being into the world. So first of all, we would have to have very careful and powerfully ethical teaching about the reproductive life of the human being.
Whatever stance one takes, whether it's pro-abortion or anti-abortion or pro-choice, not one of those groups is good enough to make a decision that holds for all of society. We're all open to mistake. We're all flawed. We're all human. And I think for any one group to make a decision for all of society is enormously insensitive and egotistical and unreal, unnatural.
As we've just heard, there are no easy solutions to the question of abortion. And it's going to become more complex as new technologies arrive on the scene, such as the abortion pill now being developed in France. It's a dilemma that won't go away. And it challenges our notion of individual freedoms and community responsibilities. It challenges our faith and the way we treat women and children in our society. You may not agree with some or any of the views expressed in this program, but it is true that women are certainly capable of the intellectual, moral, and spiritual decision-making about issues that ultimately affect their lives. Our thanks to Hilda Thomas, Grace Ravensbergen, and the Reverend Eleanor O'Neill for sharing their reflections with us this week. And our thanks to you for joining us on The Pressure Point.